Welcome to the Deep Dive, brought to you by the Kenya Wantem Notam Movement, or KWM. We're here to take the sources you've shared and, really turn them into knowledge you can use.
And our mission today is, well, it's a big one. We're going to move beyond the official stories, the comfortable narratives, and really drill down into the surprising, sometimes painful truths about Kenya's independence.
Yeah, this isn't just a history lesson, it's more of an investigation into power.
Exactly.
The topic today is a really powerful critique of Kenya's official history. We're exploring how the whole national story was built around these convenient lies.
Lies designed to legitimize the people who took power right after the colonialists left. So we're calling this Deep Dive, Kenya's Unfinished Liberation.
And our goal is to pull out the key insights, who really fought for independence, who actually benefited from it, and what dreams were betrayed.
By the end of this, you'll have a shortcut to being genuinely well-informed about the true cost of Uhuru.
Okay, so let's start where the official story begins. December 12th, 1963, the day of independence. The story we all know is, it's pure pageantry.
Oh, it's a masterpiece of political theater. If you look at the old photos, the black and white footage, it's Jomo Kenyatta, looking perfect, surrounded by world leaders.
Flags are waving.
Flags waving, the British are handing over power in this very choreographed ceremony. Everyone's smiling. It's all about a bright future, you know, Uhuru, freedom. The whole thing is presented as this peaceful, negotiated process.
But this is where the sources just pull back the curtain. They contrast that big public show with a reality that was much, much darker.
And it's what the cameras were told not to see. While all that was happening, there was still fresh blood in the detention camps, places like Hola and Athi River.
So while Kenyatta's giving speeches,
the screams of men and women who had been tortured in what was called the pipeline system they were still echoing. And maybe most importantly, the quiet betrayals, the deals to sideline the real radicals were already being planned.
that is just a stunning contrast. So the core insight right from the start is that independence wasn't just handed over at a conference table in Lancaster House.
Not at all. It was seized. It was won through a violent, desperate armed struggle by people fighting with, old guns, pangas, even their bare hands in the forests.
And the official history, the one taught in schools for generations, had to sanitize that.
Completely. It had to airbrush the violence, the sacrifice, and especially the revolutionary demands of the fighters, the Mau Mau.
Why? Why was that so important for the new government?
Because the radical demands of the Land and Freedom Army were a deeply uncomfortable truth for the people who were about to take charge.
And that wasn't just an accident of history, was it? It was a political strategy.
Oh, absolutely. Which brings us right into our first part.
Yeah.
Manufacturing legitimacy, the foundational lies.
Okay, so let's unpack the why. The new African elite, the politicians, the businessmen stepping into the colonists' old offices, they needed legitimacy, and they needed it fast.
Right. And the sources argue that to get that, they needed a history built on heroes who were controllable, mythologized, and, crucially, safely dead.
Safely dead. What does that mean exactly?
It means you can't have a living revolutionary, someone who actually fought and bled, standing up and asking difficult questions.
Questions like, hey, wait a minute, you promised us our land back, you promised an economic revolution.
Exactly. That kind of question immediately threatens the new order. The person who survived the forest remembers the promises of land redistribution, of total economic change. Their very existence is a challenge to the new elite who just want to change the faces in power but keep the system.
So this wasn't just sloppy history. It was a calculated, deliberate choice.
It was essential for them to hold on to power. Kenya's history became a kind of curated art gallery. Radical politics were sanitized. Inconvenient truths, like the socialist ideas of many fighters, were just buried.
And you can actually see this propaganda on the streets, right? In the monuments, the statues, the street names.
Absolutely. Public space becomes propaganda. The monuments you walk past in Nairobi every day, they tell a very specific story. They celebrate a certain kind of acceptable hero.
A hero whose radical edges have been smoothed over.
Precisely. Meanwhile, the people who truly refused to compromise, the ones who terrified both the colonial government and the incoming elite, they were just systematically written out of the story, reduced to a footnote.
Their crime was that their vision of a liberated Kenya was a threat to the people who ended up with all the power.
And that brings us from the abstract to the specific. Let's talk about the people who were erased. This is part two. Two faces of the struggle, the forest and the prison.
And we have to start in the forest with the ultimate revolutionary they couldn't control, Dedan Kimathi.
Kimathi is so central to this story of betrayal. He represents the pure, undiluted demand for liberation. He was born in Nairi. He was a farm laborer. He experienced the cruelty of settler colonialism firsthand.
He saw the land theft.
He saw it. He lived it. And he understood that polite petitions weren't going to get the land back. He concluded that only armed force could do it.
So, of course, the colonial government had to paint him as a monster, a terrorist.
Of course. They had to justify their own extreme violence. So their narrative completely ignored the context that the Land and Freedom Army formed in response to decades of systemic oppression.
Things like the forced labor, the pass laws.
The Kapan, yes, and the theft of the most fertile land. The LFA was a mass movement born out of desperation.
And by 1953, Kimathi is the most wanted man in the country.
He's coordinating Mao forces across the Aberdare forests. And he's not just a military guy. He's articulating a vision of total liberation. He was running a parallel government in the wilderness.
A shadow state.
A shadow state, exactly. Organizing supplies, maintaining political discipline. The British response shows you how much they feared him. They declared a state of emergency, threw over 150,000 people into concentration camps.
And when they finally captured him in 1956, the trial was a sham.
Predetermined. They hanged him in February 1957 at Kamiti Prison. And this is the critical part. They buried him in an unmarked grave. Its location is still a state secret.
So no shrine, no martyr's tomb. They wanted him to just disappear.
Completely. But here's the most revealing thing the sources point to. The post-independence government, Kenyatta's government, continued that erasure. They kept the grave a secret.
Why? Why would they do that?
Because to acknowledge Kimathi's armed struggle is to admit that he was the one who forced the British to leave. It would question the moral authority of the new government.
Because Kenyatta wasn't in the forest, he was in detention.
Exactly. Kenyatta claimed the victory that men like Kimathi had bled for. Kimathi was dangerous in death because his memory represented the pure, radical demand for land and justice. To honor him would be to indict the new regime that was built on compromise with the old system.
So the official story had to shift the focus away from the bloody forest and onto the dignified suffering of political prisoners.
Which brings us to the other face of the struggle, the Kapenguria Six, from comrades to calculation.
Right. So this is Kenyatta, Bildad Kajia, Kumu Karumba, Fred Kubai, Paul Ngai, and Aking Oneko, arrested in 52.
The evidence was manufactured, the trial was a joke, they were sent to Kapenguria, a remote place, specifically to stop any protests.
But in detention, in those harsh early years, they were supposedly a brotherhood.
They were. They were sharing suffering, but also sharing revolutionary dreams. They were debating the future of Kenya, land redistribution, economic justice, all of it.
And there were different ideas in that group, right? Kajia was a committed socialist.
Deeply committed. Karumba and Kubai were trade unionists, so they understood the working class struggle. Their shared vision was radical. The poor would inherit the land. The state would fix the injustices of the past.
And Kenyatta, the senior figure, he was listening to all this.
Listening, nodding along. But prison is a crucible. It changes people. For someone like Kajia, it hardened his convictions.
But for Kenyatta,
the sources suggest it revealed a different path. He spent those years watching the radicals, but also calculating. He realized that real power, the kind the British would hand over, required compromises.
Compromises that a true idealist like Kajia would never make.
Never. Kenyatta understood that to be the leader, he had to be the man the British could tolerate, the one who wouldn't completely upend the economic system they had built.
So the Brotherhood entered prison as comrades.
And they emerged with Kenyatta already planning how to sideline the very people who had shared his suffering. The betrayal was ideological long before it became public.
And understanding that foundational betrayal is so critical. We've just scratched the surface of how this knowledge can really reshape our understanding of everything that came after. This deep dive, brought to you by the Kenya Wantam Notam movement, is all about empowering you with that truth.
I trust you're enjoying this deep dive and learning a lot. For more great resources, visit Urgent. Download this free ebook audio, Kenya's Gen Z Must Reclaim Their Power. Remember, it is free. Read it. Take action. Tell your friends to go to wantamnotam.com, create an account, and download the free ebook audio. Again, it is free. Take action. Freedom never comes easy. What will you do?
You can also change Kenya right now. Start commenting, start posting, create your account, and share your thoughts at wantamnotam.com. And you can listen to all the KWM deep dives wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for us at ress.com/podcasts, Kenya-Wantam Notam Movement, Killa WMLM. Okay, Picking up right where we left off, with that sense of a brewing betrayal. Let's get into part 3, the Kenyatta betrayal and the shattered brotherhood.
So independence comes, and Kenyatta is making all the right speeches. He's talking about African socialism, giving land to the landless, and his old prison mates, especially Bildad Kaggia, they believe him.
They think the revolution is finally here.
And Kaggia acts on it. He goes back to his home in Kandora and starts organizing thousands of landless squatters. He's demanding that the government make good on its promises.
His argument being that this wasn't just about swapping a white elite for a black one.
Precisely. But what happened next is what the source material calls Kenya's defining betrayal. Kenyatta didn't surround himself with the forest fighters or his radical prison mates.
Who did he choose?
Conservative businessmen. Civil servants who had worked for the colonial government, and critically, the Kikuyu elite, many of whom had been colonial loyalists, the very people who'd opposed the Mau Mau.
Wow. So the freedom fighters were just pushed aside.
Immediately. And you see it most clearly in what they did with land reform. It was supposed to be about justice. Instead, it became a tool for the new elite to enrich themselves.
How did that work?
The British government provided loans, but not to the poor. The loans went to the people who already had connections and collateral politicians, top civil servants. They were the ones who could afford to buy the farms from the departing white settlers.
And the settlers sold at high prices, I assume?
At massively inflated prices.
Yeah.
So they cashed out, and the new African elite took over the land, often with government money. The landless stayed landless. The system didn't change, just the owners.
So when Kaggia protested this, when he demanded justice for the poor, Kenyatta didn't like it.
He turned on him, viciously and publicly.
This is the famous 1965 rally in Kandora, right?
That's the one. It's the moment the mask came off. Kenyatta goes to Kaggia's own constituency, stands up in front of everyone, and he doesn't debate him on policy. He humiliates him.
What did he say?
He sneered at him. He asked Kaggia what he had done for himself, why he was still poor if he was such a great leader. He basically said personal wealth was the measure of success, not sacrifice for the nation.
And then came the threat.
The chilling threat that set the tone for the next 60 years of Kenyan politics. He looked at Kaggia and said, "If you go on opposing, we will crush you into flour."
Unbelievable. A direct threat from the president to his old comrade.
And it established the template. You can talk about liberation, but if you actually demand economic equality, you will be destroyed.
And the fate of the other radicals proved he wasn't bluffing.
Not at all. Kaggia's political career was destroyed. Acheng Wananka was detained without trial a few years later. Karumba just disappeared into obscurity.
What about Paul Ngeye? He was one of the 6.
Ngeye is the tragic example. He survived politically, but only by abandoning all his principles and becoming a key part of Kenyatta's patronage machine. He chose wealth and power over the ideals of the struggle.
The brotherhood was completely shattered.
Shattered because one man chose personal power over the collective liberation they'd all dreamed of in that prison cell.
And when political marginalization wasn't enough, the state turned to something much darker. Which brings us to part 4, the martyrs of truth, the assassinations that enforced silence.
And we have to start with a man who was almost completely erased from the history books, Pio Gama Pinto.
Who was he? Why was he so dangerous?
Pinto was a brilliant socialist organizer and journalist. He was of Goan descent, but fully committed to the African liberation struggle. He was jailed during the emergency for supporting Mau Mau. He was incorruptible.
And after independence?
He became the intellectual engine of the opposition. He started newspapers, like Mwafrika, to advocate for genuine land reform. He was the one trying to unite the radicals like Kaggia against Kenyatta's conservative government.
What was his main argument?
His critique was that political independence was hollow without economic justice. He said the British had left, but their economic system was still in place, now being run by African compradors.
Compradors, meaning local collaborators who were managing the economy for foreign interests and for themselves, not for the people.
Exactly. He had the language to articulate the betrayal clearly, and that made him a huge threat.
So what happened?
In February 1965, he was shot and killed outside his home in Nairobi, right in front of his young child.
A political assassination.
Without a doubt. It took out the key organizer of the left just as they were starting to build real momentum. And the crime wasn't just the murder. It was the amnesia that followed. His name vanished from the textbooks. He was erased.
10 years later, it happens again, but this time to a much more public figure.
Yes, JM Kariuki, the millionaire who spoke for the poor.
He's such a fascinating figure, a wealthy businessman, a member of parliament, but he was constantly denouncing inequality.
And he had credibility that was impossible to attack. He'd been a Mau Mau detainee for 7 years, so the government couldn't just dismiss him as some bitter failure like they tried to with Kajia. He was a success who chose to side with the Boer.
And his most famous quote just defined the whole era.
We do not want a Kenya of 10 millionaires and 10 million beggars. It was a devastatingly simple and true critique of what was happening.
And he didn't just speak in slogans, did he?
Not at all. He started using Parliament to expose specific land-grabbing schemes, naming the powerful people involved. He was getting more and more confrontational.
Which, in that environment, was a death sentence.
It was. In March 1975, he disappeared. A few days later, his body was found in the Ngong Hills. It was a professional hit meant to send a message.
And the message was?
Shut up or die.
Was there any justice?
None. There were massive student riots, huge public funerals. Everyone knew who was behind it. But the government investigation was a sham. It just confirmed that the state would use violence to silence its critics.
So we've seen the lie being built, and we've seen the human cost. We had to connect this now to the national tragedy. This is part 5, the legacy and the unfinished struggle.
Right. What did Kenya actually lose? The sources are clear. It lost the dream of a genuine liberation. The Kenya that Kimathi and Kajia and JM fought for, it never happened.
Instead of land redistribution, we got land concentration.
Instead of economic justice, widening inequality. Instead of accountable government, ethnic patronage and corruption that became baked into the system.
And you can see that legacy today. The children of the forest fighters often live in slums, while the children of the collaborators inherited the power and the land.
It's a complete reversal of what should have been. And the sources stress this was not inevitable. There were other paths. Genuine redistribution was possible.
But it was rejected.
It was rejected because it would have required sacrifice from the very people who were in a position to benefit from the new system. They chose their own interests over the nation's.
And that cost just keeps compounding, doesn't it? The corruption, the ethnic politics, it all stems from this original sin.
It does. The system was built on a lie, and it continues to run on those same principles of elite capture and the marginalization of the poor.
So what's the way forward? The sources talk about a need for real truth and reconciliation.
But not just symbolic apologies. It would require a structural reckoning. It would mean powerful people admitting how they got their wealth and dismantling the patronage networks.
And the sources lay out a kind of roadmap for this. They call it the 4 pillars of debt to the dead.
First, acknowledge the lies. Admit officially that the history we've been taught is a distortion.
Second, honor the real heroes. Center people like Kimathi and Kajia and JM. Make their radical vision for economic justice part of the national conversation again.
Third, investigate the murders. Reopen the cases.
Yeah.
Name the perpetrators. Acknowledge the state's role. There has to be truth before there can be healing.
And the 4th pillar, the hardest one.
Redistribute the resources. Actually implement the economic justice they died for. Land reform, progressive taxation. It's not radical, it's the debt that is owed.
Because these historical myths, they're not just stories, they're prisons.
Exactly. They stop us from asking why things are the way they are. Breaking free means choosing the difficult truth over the convenient lie.
And the sources end on a hopeful note, pointing to the younger generation.
Right. Young Kenyans demanding change today, they instinctively get it. They know the fight isn't over. Their struggle for accountability is a continuation of the work started in the forests all those years ago.
So we have a choice. We can keep worshiping the false heroes cast in bronze, the men who betrayed the revolution.
Or we can honor the true liberators by finally finishing their work. The dead have done their part. Now it's our turn.
And that's the core of it all. Knowing this history isn't just about the past, it's the key to demanding a better, more just future for Kenya.
This is critical knowledge for anyone seeking to understand the foundational issues facing Kenya today. We encourage you to engage with the movement that believes this struggle isn't finished.
I trust you have gained critical insight from this deep dive into the history of betrayal and struggle. For more great resources, we urge you to visit Urgent. Download this free ebook audio, Kenya's Gen Z Must Reclaim Their Power. Remember, it is free. Read it. Take action. Tell your friends to go to wantamnotum.com, create an account, and download the free ebook audio. Again, it is free. Take action. Freedom never comes easy. What will you do?
The path to reclaiming this liberation starts with knowledge and community action.
Join the Kenya Wantam Notum movement, KWM, at www.wantamnotum.com. You can access more free downloads and resources at beacons.a82020 by books. Connect with the community on Facebook and join the conversation directly on the wantamnotum.com platform and listen to these deep dives wherever you are.
Thank you for joining us on this essential deep dive into the convenient lies and the path toward the unfinished liberation of Kenya.
We'll see you next time.